Like and subscribe right now, or you're gonna have terrible luck for the next week. Centuries ago, before scientific methods became commonplace, people used to believe just about anything, including the existence of weird creatures. All it took was a narration by one lonely traveler, and just like that, you have a new animal species. But as time has gone by, we've become better informed. We now know that the 10 animals never existed, even though at one time they were believed to. Number 10. Vegetable lamb. In most myths, animals are either a combination of two different species or a bigger and more powerful version of those we already know. But the vegetable lamb was unique. It wasn't just an animal, but also a plant, according to some accounts of the myth. But other variations of the story state that the creature was largely a plant, and instead of bearing fruits, it produced a lamb. Just like you'd expect of any lamb, this had blood, bones, and flesh. The only difference was that it couldn't move. It was connected to its parent plant via a stem to its navel, forming a sort of umbilical cord. The stem was flexible enough to allow the lamb to feed on the vegetation around the plant until there was no more to be eaten, at which point both the plant and lamb would die. Those around could then feast on the dead lamb, whose blood supposedly tasted like honey. The wool, on the other hand, was used to make clothes, particularly head coverings. Possibly, the myth might have been based on the cotton plant, which, despite being common in Central Asia, was relatively unheard of to the Northern Europeans before the 10th century. Number 9. Deloises Ape. Deloises Ape was thought to be a new primate species discovered in 1920 by Francois Deloises, a big-time Swiss oil geologist. As the story goes, the geologist was out in the wild chilling with his friends near the Venezuela-Colombian border when they were attacked by a pair of monkeys. They shot at them, killing one while the other disappeared into the jungle. The monkeys were unique in the eyes of Deloises with his party because of their big size, so the geologist took a picture of the carcass but totally forgot about the whole encounter until years later when the photo was discovered by a French anthropologist, Georges Montandon. The anthropologist was convinced that this was a never-before-seen ape and went ahead to create a new genus for it. According to him, it was an unknown American version of the orangutan, chimpanzee, and gorilla. But when he was put to the task at the French Academy of Sciences, he couldn't defend his supposed new ape. Turns out the primate wasn't unknown, but a rather well-established species called the spider monkey. Number 8. Kraken. The Kraken is one of the most well-known mythical creatures since it was first imagined in the 12th century. It has its origins in the Nordic folklore and is believed to frequent the coasts of Greenland and Norway. Today, it's featured in some of the most popular works of art like film, literature, and television. The Kraken myth was only natural at a time when the sea was largely mysterious, leaving a lot of speculation and a fertile breeding ground for embellished animal encounters. And just like most myths, the Kraken might have been a real-life animal blown out of proportion. According to the myth, the huge monster was a deep sea dweller and could ascend every now and then to feed or attack ships. Owing to its huge size, it could cause massive whirlpools with its movement, which will, in turn, capsize vessels. After that, it'll reach out with its massive tentacles to drag the ship below the surface and swallow it whole. The myth further alleges that there were just about 2 of these big guys, since their massive size means the ocean would have been an insufficient source of food if they were to reproduce in large numbers. In recent years, scientists have theorized that the Kraken could have been based on another real-life aquatic creature like a giant squid. Giant squids grow to as much as 10 meters and can weigh in at 700 kilograms. Number 7. Bonicon. The renowned Roman author Pliny the Elder is credited as being the first to describe the Bonicon, a bull with a horse-like mane and inward curving horns. From the sound of it, the Bonicon is far much more normal than most of the animals you'll encounter in mythology, but you'll be mistaken to believe this. Since its horns were backward-facing, it couldn't use them to mount a good enough defense against attackers, so it had another, perhaps more lethal weapon: its fecal matter. This wasn't your usual waste material. It was highly acidic and ensured the Bonicon's safety by burning would-be pursuers. Number 6. Basilisk. If they're not blowing normal animals out of proportion, myths create entirely new ones by combining several animals into one. That's the story of the basilisk. As the myth goes, the basilisk was a combo of 2 very unlikely animals, a rooster and a snake. And how did it come about? A snake's egg was incubated, for whatever reason, by a cockerel. The animal's chicken appearance was around the head, while the remaining part took on a serpentine nature, and it wasn't exactly something you'll want to encounter. According to the myth, it could kill by merely staring at the victim. It also had one of the most potent venoms and, in some variations of the myth, the ability to breathe fire. Killing the basilisk was one hell of a task and was only possible with the use of a weasel, the only animal immune to the death stare. The weasel's urine was also quite the bad news for the seemingly formidable half-serpent, half-chicken monster. First accounts of the basilisk date back to the Roman Empire by author Pliny the Elder. Number 5. Unicorn. Unicorns are by far the most popular mythical creatures today. Though the word unicorn itself might not necessarily refer to the animal, the meaning behind it is still influenced by these creatures. In its modern-day usage, unicorn primarily refers to something rare. Depictions of unicorns vary, with some being horse-like and others more goat-like. But one thing is usually constant: the single horn jutting out of its head. Another unique feature is the pure white coat that was a reflection of its significance in the antiquity world. According to most myths, the unicorn was a symbol of purity and as such couldn't be captured by anyone else except a virgin. The horn was also believed to have special powers, including curing the sick and sanitizing drinking water. Unicorn myths were quite widespread, with the legendary creatures appearing in Mesopotamian drawings and in Chinese and Indian ancient myths. Though they didn't feature in Greek mythology, unicorns were a part of Greek natural history writers. According to the writers, they believed these animals existed in the far-off land of India. Ctesias, for instance, described the rare beasts in his book about India, terming them wild, having a horn and fleet of foot. Number 4. Griffin. The Griffin myth was most prominent in both Greece and Egypt. The animal was one of the most revered at the time for two reasons. For one, it was made up of a lion and an eagle, two animals that are considered powerful even in today's world. Most of the griffin's body was a lion, including the tail and back legs. The head, on the other hand, was that of an eagle. In some cases, the griffin was depicted with wings. Finally, the griffins were also held in high regard as they were thought to guard over gold deposits. Their nests were also thought to contain gold nuggets. The reverence extended to medieval times, when the griffin was used to symbolize divinity among the Christians of that time. According to historians, the myth of the griffin might not be so far-fetched. Of course, there was absolutely no such animal, but the story itself might have been influenced by a beaked dinosaur called Protoceratops. Number 3. Dragon. Aside from unicorns, dragons are some of the better known and often referenced mythical creatures, and unlike most other beasts, they aren't restricted to just one part of the world, but run across the globe. Of course, the name varied from one region to another, but a common feature among all of them was their serpentine depiction. As for a larger part, these dragons were thought to have the ability to breathe fire, a property that is quite popular in movies involving these beasts. Other common features in different myths include 4 legs, usually with 3 or 4 toes on each foot, a tail, and scaly skin. First, dragon-like depictions go as far back as ancient Mesopotamia and become common across different cultures. Some modern-day experts have suggested that dragon myths might have been influenced by huge migrating crocodiles. Others argue that dragons might have actually been the result of huge dinosaur bones being discovered by ancient civilizations.
Now it's time for today's best pick.
Today's photo was sent to us by a subscriber, so if you come across a photo online and want to know more details about it, just send it over to us. We might even feature it in a future video. Number 2. Aspidoclone. The aspidoclone is thought to either be a big whale or turtle the size of a small island, but the island resemblance wasn't just confined to its size. The aspidoclone's back had a rocky appearance complete with trees, valleys, and general greenery you'll find on a real island. Naturally, this was quite deceiving for sailors. Once they saw it, they'd usually take a break from sailing and set up camps on the monster's back. They'll even light fires to make a snack and keep warm in the middle of the sea. Obviously, this was upsetting for the aspidoclone, so the beast would immediately take a deep dive in a bid to cool off. Bad news for the sailors. But people weren't its staple food. The monster fed mainly on fish. To lure them, it would open up its mouth, emitting a sweet, irresistible smell. The fish would come running, only to be gobbled up. The fact that it used to eat fish means it would have been more whale than turtle. That is, if it actually existed. But as it stands now, nothing of the sort has ever been encountered for the thousands of years that the myth has been around.
Before we move on, I've got a little challenge for you that'll take 5 seconds to complete. So here's the deal. You just leave a like on this video, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, and you will get 25 years of amazing luck. Try it, it really works.
Number 1. Jackalope. The jackalope was a horned rabbit, spotting the characteristic antlers common with antelopes, and while the animal is more modern, there are quite an amount of paintings depicting horned rabbits. In Persia, for instance, there is a 13th century work of art depicting a rabbit with a single horn like a unicorn. Europe also had a few of these drawings dating to the medieval and Renaissance periods. Surprisingly, the horned rabbit was recognized as a real animal by early scientific texts for the longest time. The entire idea of these rabbits was discarded by scientists toward the end of the 18th century. More modern horned rabbits turned out to be infected by the cottontail rabbit papillomavirus. The infection caused antler-like growths all over the rabbit's body, including the head. The jackalope might have also been popularized by two brothers from Douglas, Wyoming. According to the New York Times, the brothers had studied taxidermy by mail order. In 1932, they fell in love with the idea of deer antlers on a rabbit, so they made it happen and sold their first creation for $10 to a hotel owner. This creation saw the animal become an iconic symbol of Douglas City.